I am in Melbourne. Well, I'm just outside Melbourne in a place called Inverloch on the
Oh,
South Gippsland coast.
I did not
This
know
is
that.
just our holiday place at the moment. So it's about 90 minutes outside Melbourne.
Uh-huh.
And we spend a lot of time here. So you're actually looking in my shed, which is my office.
Yeah. What's
I came to SACS in Standard 9 because basically I was in school overseas and Dad was a mining engineer. So he then decided, well, mining is not really that great in India anymore. So we came out to South Africa. And my first Standard 8 was spent in Fisher, which was an amazing experience. And then I went into SACS because Fisher being co-ed and it was my first co-ed school ever because I'd always been in boys' boarding schools. And so then came to SACS because Dad was working in Namaqualand. So I was in the boarding house at Rosedale from 9 and 10. So yeah, that's how I got to SACS. So I only spent 2 years at SACS, but very enjoyable 2 years, I must admit. So, and from there, uh, look, the guys at the boarding house I knew very well, Mark Simmons, Norbert Wegner, you guys from the hockey team and that type of stuff. Uh, so from SACS, it was a case of going to UCT. And I was one of those lucky guys that Mr. Milan didn't want in his army. So I didn't have to do army. And I was probably the only guy at SACS in our year that didn't do Afrikaans. So I did French instead for matric. So, and she was the tuck shop lady. So very nice person. I can't remember her name, unfortunately, but she was a lovely person. So doing matric and then UCT, and then went from UCT to Price Waterhouse in Cape Town. A BCom. It was a BCom, straight BCom, and yeah, that was a great experience because I was probably a year younger than most of the other guys around because most of them had done their year at Army. So I had a little bit of growing up to do, I think, at UCT for the first couple of years. So it was fun. It was a really excellent time. I joined the rowing club. I actually played rugby a little bit at UCT, not serious stuff. And then the boarding house, interestingly enough, I was boarding with Peter Whipp and Chris Pope, the Springboks. And on our floor, we had, and I could drop names, but there was a lot of rugby players who went to Driekoppen as and so that was a lot of fun. So then post graduating, I went Price Waterhouse Cape Town, did my articles there. And once I graduated, I then asked for a transfer to Australia. And so I was hoping Sydney, but I ended up in Hobart, which was fascinating. It was brilliant. So for 2 years, I spent in Hobart. And then after that, I came back to Cape Town, but I didn't want to join Price Waterhouse anymore. So I basically said, look, I'm going to stay in Australia. I had already become a permanent resident and had my citizenship. So that was my big aim in life, is basically to get out of South Africa at the time. And I'm sure the guys will have similar stories about things happening in uni and all that type of stuff. So I won't go there now. No, at economics, our lecturer was arrested for, I can't remember his name. I'm sort of forgetting all the names, but I was also filmed by the secret police protesting outside, along the avenue, waving hoot if you don't agree and all this type of stuff. And it was weird. It was weird. And in our res, we had a police spy as well. We didn't know that for the first year, but and then we've discovered a few things. Anyway, long story short, it was quite nice to come to Australia and just the whole pressures of everything just disappears. And bringing up the kids here was probably the best thing I ever did. I left in 82 permanently for my first 2 years. And then after that, I came back to get married. I married a Rustenburg girl, Ros Hudson. I think a lot of people know Christine Hudson, her older sister. And and we've got two kids now here in Australia. So they basically Australians from day one. We went back a couple of times because my folks live still in Cape Town, so we would visit them a lot. And so I basically made Australia home and used to come back to South Africa for very enjoyable visits, I must add. But I was always felt a sense of relief coming back here. Australia definitely became home for me and the family. So it was just a very relaxed way of life. It's very hard to describe the differences if you haven't actually lived abroad. And I'm sure most of the guys have, and they may probably say the same thing. But living in South Africa, you get used to the lifestyle perhaps, but there's always issues. There's always a downside, the political downside, economic downside, security and all that type of stuff. And so I don't need those hassles in my life. So here I am. I came from England, but I lived in India, basically. I went to school in England, but my parents were living in India, and Dad was working on a copper mine in India at the time. Just outside Calcutta, just a little mining town about 200 k's east of Calcutta. We spent a couple of holidays in Cape Town. My mum, on my mum's side, has a twin sister, and her parents lived in Cape Town, so we'd visit every now and again. And so it wasn't that much of a shock, but yeah.
Beginning of Staten Line, you're coming into Rosedale. All the guys know each other. What was that like? What did it feel like?
A bit weird, I guess, but I got used to it because SACS was probably my 6th school that I'd been to overall in terms of moving around the world and going to boarding school. So you make friends pretty quickly. You don't cause any waves. You just fit in, find out who the main oaks are, and you just join them. And mostly good. I think I met Perry Norgard, Glenn Ashton, Peter Walker. I think he spent 1 year at Rosedale, but it was good to catch up with him because he was the difficult thing for us in Rosedale was the day kids kept themselves, and the boarders sort of, because we never shared lunch times because we'd always go back for lunch, so we'd never mix with you guys very much apart from being in class or at PE or sport. So Newman, I can't remember, Stan Newman, Alex Matsoon, just trying to think, there was another Newman from Oranjezicht or from up Swakop Way, and
Alan?
Dale Packett, all those guys. So so there's a whole heap of guys I met, and obviously shared a common interest in just having a bit of fun and being a little bit naughty too. It always helps. So good times. I can imagine being getting out of Rosedale every now and again and sneaking off to Forries, bumping into people that perhaps we shouldn't be bumping into, but they were good. They didn't dob us in, so it was nice. Getting caught coming back into Rosedale from an evening out, and again the teachers were pretty cool. Actually, they just said, "Don't do that again." Of course not. I would never do that again. The shitty side of Rosedale was just the lack of freedom. I'd been used to pretty much a lot of freedoms in the schools I went, boarding schools I was in England. You had your own radio, you could play your own music and stuff. What it was, tape decks and things. Whereas Rosedale, you weren't allowed any of that stuff, and you just had to listen to some pipe music played by the housemaster at the time. Now, depending on how progressive they were pretty. We had some guys who were really good, and they liked some pretty out there music, so we would get a good education and pretty hard rock. But then we would default back to things like, Bye Bye Mr. American Pie, which is a song I never ever want to hear ever again. It was on loop, and it was just, oh God, it was just terrible. So, and I think Boss Wyford was in my first year, and he was an interesting guy. He was really, really interesting. And Mr. Patterson, I didn't really have much to do with, but because the headmaster of the school sort of became Rosedale headmaster as well. So it was just, but anyway, look, the guys were pretty good. I mean, we were, again, I think just perhaps the lack of freedom a little bit. Perhaps you didn't deserve it because we were totally irresponsible, which is probably more accurate. And the boss Whitefoot almost had like a court trying to nut out who and eliminate. In the end, he gave up. He basically said, everyone is gated. No one can go away for the weekend. So I felt terrible about that. So I owned up, and he whacked me 6 of the best. But anyway, the guys had their weekend off. So, but that was probably the dumbest thing I did. And the most irresponsibly dumb.
Yeah, but it was also the bravest thing.
We're just silly in hindsight. If you think about it, I mean, there could have been an emergency or something, and but we're 16, 17-year-olds. We don't think very well.
That's very funny.
I like Mr. Campbell. He was the Latin teacher. He was very laid back. He put up with so much. The guys would. I mean, I remember, and I'm not sure. There is a common thread. Mike Canty would often interrupt and say the most ridiculous things, but so would Carlton Holt every now and again. I remember one time him saying, "Excuse me, sir, I can hear the lions roaring." I mean, I don't know why he would say such things. They probably were, but and he just took it in his stride. He didn't really hassle the teacher. All the other teachers I got on really well. I can't remember all their names, but the one that probably was the most difficult for me was Mr. Brown, the English teacher, because I think he had his pets, in his English class, what have you, and I sort of fell outside that group. He didn't know me very well, I guess. So it took me. I was a little bit. When I got my matric results, I went back to him and said, "How did the other guys go?" "Oh, no, so well." So it took me great pleasure to tell him I got a B in all his favourites, and he got a C. So it was just so nice. Anyway, it was just a little bit of karma from my point of view. It was just annoying me because every time I did an essay, myself and the other guy, Coates, I think was today, because we put in an essay, I always got a C, whether it was brilliant or crap. I got a C all the way through my English terms with Doug Brown. So it was just an interesting, and he's also the headmaster of the junior schools, but of Michaela House, I think, the other boarding house. Didn't know him that well, so it was hard for me to sort of relate. Sure. I look, Mr. Oberholzer, or Fluffy Oberholzer for maths. He was brilliant. I just liked him because I think he was a genuine soul. I think he had his grasp of the English language was a little bit weird sometimes, and he would come up with his expression. So that was always entertaining. But I think in the end he had a good heart, and he was good. He was a good teacher. So
he was a very good teacher.
The saddest teacher I think I had was a Miss Birch. I think she came in as a relief teacher when I was in 9 or 10. I heard later that she died, unfortunately, and she was a gorgeous teacher, which is probably why everyone picked on her. But gosh, it was she was really. I think she was a relief teacher for one of the science teachers at the time. I think the guys gave her a lot of grief. I just feel a bit sorry for her now. In hindsight, we were a bit nasty. Socially, I struggled a little bit. Only because I was about a year and a half younger than most of the guys. I mean, look, you go to Pig and Whistle, not a problem. You have X amount of drinks and then finish off with a glass of tussies. No one's really going to care. But the guys are a lot older. They had pretty strong friendship groups amongst themselves. And so I actually got to know a lot of the Rhodesian guys, Zimbabwean guys, and got to know them really, really well and sort of had a good click. And because we were in Driekoppen together, clearly they weren't going to be local guys anyway. And it was interesting times. I think I was a little bit awkward around females being in a boy boarding school all my life and stuff like that. So I would probably say more in social interactions, sort of a little behind, but anyway, you soon catch up. It's not a big deal. I just roll with the punches. I never got too political, only because I hadn't lived all my life in South Africa. So my sort of terms of reference were only the last 3 years, basically, of school and then into university. And the injustices of what happened in the past would be historical rather than actual for me. So to be in the present, I mean, I was a bit scared when I think there were the riots happening somewhere at Crossroads, and we were trying to get guys to the airport, what have you. It was always a bit of a bind, and I think it was quite a nervous time, driving on that road, armed with cricket bats and baseball bats in case we got on the way to take guys to the airport and what have you. So we sort of had like a security shuttle going back and forwards to drop the guys off. So that was a bit scary. I think, but I wasn't so scared from, being hurt necessarily but I could understand why they were doing it. It wasn't a case of, oh no, those bastards, they're stopping me from driving. No, I understand exactly why they were doing it. So therefore I had some empathy. But you still feel a little insecure anyway. One of my regrets is that I did not join the alumni, the SACS Old Boys alumni. I had a little bit of a run-in with Patterson on a couple of issues, and I just thought, well, fuck this. So my bad. In hindsight, I should have joined the alumni because it's got nothing to do with Patterson and my feelings towards the school. But that was one thing, because I'm a UCT alumni, and I have been to a few dinners and things when they've had visiting people coming out from UCT, but not from SACS, unfortunately. And I'm also not that huge on Facebook and social media, so I'm quite a private person, so I don't really mix a lot. And when I came out to Melbourne, when we first came out to Melbourne, I sort of made a promise to myself that I want to integrate into Australian life, not become a little enclave of South Africa, So all my friends now, apart from one or two, are basically Australian or French or American or whatever, and very few are South African. We have a couple from UCT that we catch up with and have been really good mates for a long time, but not SACS Old Boys, unfortunately. and happy to redress that. Oh, I do have a Facebook presence, and I still have a presence with Norbs and Mark Simmons. I mean, I did a lot of UCT time with Norb, and I used to travel up to Southwest with him and go fishing with him, and all that type of stuff back in the day. So yeah, and in fact, when I'm coming out this time, I'm going to catch up with him as well, stay with him in East London, and with Mark Sims, hopefully spend a few days with him post the reunion as well. So yeah, look, I'm really looking forward to it. Really looking forward to catching with everyone over there, and I hope and I have some sadness for the guys who I won't catch up with. You know, the ones that are passed on from years ago. Alex Matsuda's one from surfing days, and Stan Newman. So yeah, a little bit sad about those, but but yeah, I'm really looking forward to catching up with the guys and sharing some fond memories. Terry de Jong was one. I knew about through, I think, Peter Rasmus and Brian Jackson. I've kept touch with him because Ros and Jane were good friends together at Rustenburg together. So through that connection, I think Gary Foles' wife is a friend of Ros's as well. So there are a few other connections there which keep the news flowing. So we sort of get to know what's happening. But no, sadly, I've lost track with a lot of the other guys, which is why this is so brilliant for me. Yeah, I sort of fell into it. I left a particular business, and then I started my own consultancy for a couple of years, and then I thought, why am I doing it? And so I just decided, well, look, in between times, I'll just take a bit of time out, and we never went back to it. So I had a good career in finance in the pharmaceutical companies and stuff. So
we didn't look.
So from Pricewaterhouse, when I came here, I then joined Foster's, and spent a few years with them. This is outside Pricewaterhouse. Now outside in the big wide world, the real. And then I fell into the pharmaceutical industry. First of all, and it was a small Australian subsidiary of a big one called Servier Laboratories, and they're basically in the oncology. And then a succession of pharmaceutical companies, little ones, startups. So I became quite startups and what have you. And I followed a particular guy who became my mentor. And together we started a few businesses together. And again, in the healthcare space. And then after, so it was like mainly subsidiaries of American companies initially, and then I went and joined another company, a subsidiary of a French company. So and mainly diabetes, cancer, that sort of. And so that's been basically been my life. So I basically became the finance director and IT guru, believe it or not. I know bugger all about IT now. It's way past me now. But in the day, I plug things in and do things and learn the hard way. But yeah, so I finished basically the finance director of a French company, and then moved on to my consultancy, which is basically, again, in the healthcare area, just helping people with strategic planning and organizing and regulatory work, because pharmaceutical companies rely on a lot of regulation, obviously, because you're injecting drugs, putting drugs into people, so they have to be good. So that's so I sort of finished up about 8 years ago, and so Ros was still working, which is she loves her work. So I can go and she works for a dialysis company. She's sort of the main training person, and COVID was an interesting time for us because I wasn't working, which is great. So this working from home business was very good for not only Ros but also my kids. The kids follow my footsteps. They're both accountants as well, and 33 and 32. My daughter's 33 and Stuart's 30. No grandkids yet, so we'll keep fingers. But so we have a fantastic over here, and the opportunity to travel has always been great. So when I was because there are always multinational companies, I always got a chance to travel a lot. So I visited France and Italy and the US and Asia and all those places, but often on my own. Ros never came with me, which is a real sad thing because we could have really enjoyed those things. We traveled to Paris together once for a few weeks, but go to Barcelona and go to conferences here, there, and everywhere. I was a very fortunate person. What I contributed was probably very little, but in the scheme of things, because you're always a very small part of the organization in Australia, and you're worth about 10% of the total revenue. But generally speaking, there was an interesting part because everyone wanted to come see us. And we said, no, 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 we'll come see you. No, we'll come see you. So yes. So I think I ended up on a high. You know, as I said to you, I sort of fell into it. Didn't really plan on it, and I thought, no, this is it. I prefer this life. So it's good. I can honestly say I'm a bit sick of the politics and things. I think as you rise up through the ranks, I think you having to deal with personnel issues rather than, you know, and these become very difficult. And in the pharmaceutical industry, over that period of time that I was in it, there was a lot of rationalization. So people were taking over other companies, what have you. So there was a lot of bad blood and fallout that's never printed, never published.
Cultural.
You know, correct. And it is quite sad sometimes, because people that you don't want to lose get lost in the process. I myself have been retrenched 3 times, so I know the feeling well. The first time when retrenchment wasn't a good word. The other 2 were brilliant because you got payouts, you know. So, so you always look on the positive side of those types of things. But, so yeah, so I had experienced the whole game.
You were ready.
I was ready, absolutely ready. We had to do a lot of prep work as well because we were presenting when we landed. The trip back was always the best, you know, having a bit of fun, and, you know, so laying over somewhere would have been perfect, you know. But, you know, they always wanted you back early and all that type of stuff.